A scavenger stumbles upon a derelict ship in a wasteland junkyard. But the moment he touches it, the ship wakes up and calls him Commander. Whispers of a forgotten war flood his mind. Enemy drones attack. A warrior in stasis warns him to run. Now hunted across the stars, he must uncover the truth. Why does the ship remember him when he doesn't remember himself? The hidden war has begun, and he's the only one who can end it. If you're new here, then please subscribe this channel and show thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move to this wonderful story. The wind howled through the junkyard, kicking up dust that stung Jace's eyes as he wiped his face with a grimy sleeve, scanning the mountains of broken machines. Most were worthless, rusted shells of old transports and shattered drones. But Jace had a knack for finding treasure in trash. And then he saw it, half buried under a collapsed scaffold, a sleek, dagger-shaped hull gleaming faintly under the setting sun, untouched by time, its surface etched with strange symbols that pulsed like a slow heartbeat as he reached out, fingers brushing the cold metal. And the moment he touched it, the ship hummed to life, a door sliding open with a hiss to reveal a pristine interior untouched by dust or decay, the air inside smelling like ozone and something older, like a storm waiting to break. And then a voice, soft and genderless, echoed from the walls. Commander identified, welcome back. But Jace froze, whispering, I'm not a commander, as the ship ignored him, lights flickering on to guide him toward a cockpit where the controls lit up under his gaze. Star maps flashing in languages he shouldn't understand but did. A headache spiking behind his eyes as flashes of battles and a woman in silver armor seared into his mind, fragments of a war lost before it began. And outside, the ground trembled as three black-clad figures emerged from the dust, their eyes glowing faintly red, the ship's voice turning urgent. Hostiles detected. Recommend immediate departure. And Jace didn't argue, grabbing the controls as the ship lifted off on its own, soaring into the sky while the figures below shrank into specks, the stars blurring past as he stared at his reflection in the glass, the face looking back his own, but the eyes holding something older, something the ship seemed to recognize as, it whispered, You do not remember yet, but you will. Leaving Jace with a question burning in his chest. What had he just stepped into? And why did the ship know him when he didn't know himself? The ship's interior hummed with a quiet energy as Jace stumbled through its corridors, the walls pulsing with a soft blue glow that seemed to breathe in time with his racing heart, his fingers trailing along surfaces that felt more like living, skin than cold metal, the voice of the ship, Vesper, whispering in his mind like a half-remembered dream, guiding him deeper into its belly, where the air grew colder and the light dimmer until he found himself standing before a sealed chamber, its surface etched with the same strange symbols as the ship's hull, symbols that somehow made sense to him, though he'd never seen them before. And as he pressed his palm against the door, it slid open with a hiss, revealing a single stasis pod suspended in the center of the room, its glass frosted over but the outline of a figure just visible inside. A woman clad in armor that shimmered like liquid silver, her face peaceful in sleep, but her presence radiating something ancient and powerful. And before Jace could speak, the pod systems activated with a series of clicks and whirs, the frost melting away as the glass retracted, releasing a gust of chilled air that carried the scent of ozone and something faintly floral. And then her eyes snapped open. Silver, piercing, locking onto his with an intensity that made his breath catch. And the first word she spoke was a command, sharp and urgent. Run. Outside, the ship shuddered as something heavy latched onto its hull, the screens along the walls flickering to life to show sleek insect-like drones clamping onto the exterior, their cores pulsing a sickly red, their movements too precise, too purposeful to be mere machines, and Sarah, because that was her name, though Jace didn't know how he knew, was already moving, her armor shifting like liquid as she grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the cockpit, her voice low and steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. They found us and they won't stop until we're both dead. Jace's hands flew over the controls, his movements instinctive as if his body remembered what his mind did not. Weapons he hadn't known existed deploying from hidden compartments, their energy beams slicing through the drones with terrifying efficiency, but with each shot a sharp pain lanced through his skull. Flashes of another life searing behind his eyes. A battlefield strewn with wreckage, a fleet of ships burning in the void, a man who looked like him but wasn't, standing before a crowd of soldiers and speaking words that felt like a farewell. And through the haze of pain he heard Sarah's voice, calm but insistent. "You're remembering, and that's why they're afraid." The last drone exploded in a shower of sparks, the ship falling silent once more. But the weight of what had just happened hung heavy in the air, Sarah studying him with those silver eyes as if she could see straight through to the fragments of memory stirring inside him. And when she spoke again, her words were quiet but carried the weight of a truth he wasn't ready to face. "You're not him, but you carry his shadow, and that's enough for the enemy to hunt you across the stars." Outside the view screen, the blackness of space stretched endlessly, but Jace knew now that it wasn't empty. It was alive with dangers he'd only begun to understand, and the ship beneath his feet, the woman beside him, the memories clawing at the edges of his mind. They were all pieces of a puzzle he'd been thrust into without warning. And as Vesper's engines hummed to life, carrying them away from the wreckage of the drones and toward whatever lay ahead, Jace realized there was no turning back. The past was awake, and it would not let him go. The ship drifted through the void like a ghost, its engines barely whispering, as Jace stared at the coordinates Sarah had input. A nameless moon on the edge of known space, its surface pockmarked with craters that hid something far more dangerous than rocks. The weight of what they were about to do pressing down on him, with every passing second as the fragments of memories that weren't his own continued to surface like shards of broken glass, each one cutting deeper than the last, revealing glimpses of a war fought in shadows, of enemies that wore familiar faces, of betrayals that had shattered entire worlds. And beside him, Sarah stood motionless, her silver armor reflecting the dim light of the console, her eyes fixed on the approaching moon with a focus that bordered on obsession, her voice barely above a whisper as she spoke. "This is where it began, and where it will end." The ship's scanners flickered to life as they entered the moon's orbit, revealing a network of tunnels beneath the surface, their entrances hidden beneath layers of dust and debris. But the energy signatures were unmistakable. Someone, or something, had been here recently, and the thought sent a chill down Jace's spine as Vesper descended, its landing gear extending with a soft hiss as it touched down on the barren surface, the dust outside swirling in the weak gravity before, settling once more, leaving the landscape eerily still like a graveyard waiting for its next occupant. Jace hesitated at the airlock, his hand hovering over the release button. The weight of the weapon Sarah had given him, a sleek, curved blade that hummed with energy, heavy at his side, his breath fogging the visor of his helmet as he glanced at her, searching for reassurance in her silver eyes but finding only resolve. Her voice calm but firm as she said, "Stay close and trust nothing you see." The airlock opened with a groan, the stale air of the moon rushing in as they stepped onto the surface, the dust crunching underfoot like brittle bones, the silence so complete it was suffocating. The only sound the steady rhythm of their breathing, through the comms, and as they approached the nearest tunnel entrance, the darkness within seemed to pulse, as if alive, the walls lined with strange, organic-looking growths that glowed faintly in the dim light of their helmets. Their surfaces, slick with moisture that reflected their distorted images back at them, twisting their features into something monstrous. The deeper they went, the more the tunnel seemed to change, the walls shifting from rough stone to smooth metal, the air growing thicker, harder to breathe, as if the moon itself was resisting their intrusion. And then they found it, a chamber, hidden deep beneath the surface, its walls lined with rows upon rows of stasis pods, each one containing a figure frozen in time, their faces eerily familiar, their features matching those of people Jace had known, had trusted, and the realization hit him like a physical blow. These weren't just soldiers, they were replacements, copies meant to infiltrate and destroy from within, and at the center of the chamber stood a single console, its surface covered in the same strange symbols as the ship, its screen flickering, with a message that made Jace's blood run cold. "Protocol initiated. Awakening sequence in progress. Sarah's hand tightened around her weapon, her voice sharp with urgency. We're too late. They've already begun. And as if in response, the pods began to hiss open one by one, the figures inside stirring, as their eyes snapped open, glowing the same sickly red as the drones that had attacked the ship. Their movements jerky at first, then fluid, unnatural, as they turned toward Jace and Sarah with expressions that held no recognition, no humanity, only hunger. And in that moment, Jace understood the true horror of the war they'd been fighting. It wasn't just about conquest, it was about erasure, about replacing everything that made them who they were with something hollow, something obedient. And as the first of the figures lunged, its fingers elongating into razor-sharp claws, Jace raised his weapon, the blade humming to life as he braced himself for the fight ahead, the ship's voice echoing in his comms. Frantic now, multiple hostiles detected, retreat advised. But there was no retreat, not anymore. Not when the fate of everything he'd ever known was standing right in front of him, waiting to be cut down. The air in the chamber grew thick with the sound of awakening pods, each hiss like a serpent's warning as the figures inside stepped forward, their movements too smooth, too precise, their glowing red eyes locking onto Jace and Sarah with a hunger that wasn't human, wasn't alive in any way that mattered. And Jace tightened his grip on the humming blade, its energy pulsing in time with his racing heart, as the first of them lunged, claws slashing through the air where his head had been a second before. Sarah, moving like lightning beside him, her own weapon a blur of silver as it carved through the false flesh of their enemies, the scent of burning metal and something sickly sweet filling the cramped space as they fought back to back, the ship's voice crackling in their comms, urgent and strained. The system is compromised. Detonation sequence activated. You have minutes to escape. But the words barely registered as Jace parried another attack, his body moving on instinct. Memories that weren't his guiding his hands as he struck down one enemy after another, their bodies collapsing into piles of twitching limbs and sparking wires. The truth of what they were becoming horrifyingly clear. These weren't just copies. They were puppets. Hollowed-out shells controlled by something far worse, something that had been waiting in the dark for its chance to rise again. Sarah grabbed his arm, her silver armor streaked with dark fluid, her voice cutting through the chaos. The console. We have to destroy it before the signal spreads. And Jace nodded, slicing through the last of the figures blocking their path. As they sprinted toward the center of the chamber, the console's screen now flashing a frantic countdown, the symbols shifting too fast to follow, the air vibrating with a low, ominous hum that seemed to come from deep within the moon itself, as if the entire structure was a living thing, a weapon biding its time. Sarah didn't hesitate. She drove her blade into the console with a force that sent sparks flying, the screen shattering into fragments of light. But it wasn't enough. The hum growing louder, the ground beneath them trembling as the walls began to crack, veins of that same sickly red energy spreading like blood through water. And Jace knew then what had to be done, the memory surfacing like a long-buried instinct. The ship had a self-destruct sequence, one powerful enough to vaporize the moon, and everything on it. And as he shouted the command into his comms, the ship's response was immediate. Resigned. Affirmative. Detonation in 90 seconds. Evacuation protocol initiated. Sarah's eyes met his, wide with understanding, and without another word they turned and ran, the tunnel collapsing behind them as they raced toward the surface, the moon shuddering like a dying beast, the air thick with dust and the acrid stench of burning circuits, their breaths coming in ragged gasps as they reached the ship, the airlock slamming shut behind them just as the first explosion rocked the ground, the force of it sending them tumbling into the cockpit, the view screen filled with the blinding light of the chain reaction, tearing the moon apart behind them as Vesper's engines screamed to life, hurling them into the void just as the shockwave hit, the ship spinning wildly for a heart-stopping moment before stabilizing, the debris field spreading behind them like a funeral shroud. Silence settled over the cockpit, heavy and suffocating, the weight of what they'd done, what they'd lost hanging between them. But as Jace looked down at his hands, still trembling with adrenaline, he realized something had shifted. The fragments of memory slotting into place like pieces of a puzzle he hadn't known he was solving. The face of the man in his visions now clear, his own face, but older, wearier. The face of someone who had fought this war before and paid the price. Sarah watched him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight, her voice quiet but steady. It's not over. They'll keep coming. But now they know we're coming too. Jace nodded, turning his gaze to the stars ahead, the vast, uncharted black that held both their past and their future, the ship's controls humming under his fingertips as he input new coordinates, a single thought burning brighter than the explosion behind them. They had started something today, something that couldn't be stopped, and as Vesper leaped into the void, carrying them toward the next battle, the next fragment of truth, Jace allowed himself a small, grim smile, because for the first time, he knew exactly who he was and what he had to do.